2026 sees me travel the length and breadth of England to run a marathon per week in each of its 39 historic counties. Why? To raise funds for Tommy's, the charity that does incredible work to try to end the heartbreak of baby loss. I'll be joined each week by someone who has their own story of loss, their own rollercoaster journey, their own reason to be there. This podcast shares those stories in the hope that they can bring awareness to an often undiscussed topic and even, perhaps, a flicker of light in someone's darkness. You can follow the runs, the stories, and donate to the cause at marathonsformiracles.com. Enjoy. Hello, welcome to week 8 of the Marathons for Miracles podcast. What are we now? 20% of the way through. So I'm mad to think that it's been that long since we started, but things are still going well. And this week we move on to Northamptonshire with Robin and Annabel. Welcome.
Hi.
Hello.
Thanks.
Thanks for having us.
You're very welcome. And thank you for being part of the challenge and what we're doing. Robin and Annabel are the start of a theme for the next couple of weeks in that we met at university in Durham. So they are longer term friends rather than people we've shipped in just for Marathons for Miracles. So yeah, nice to have some familiar faces and also slightly unfamiliar topic compared to some of the weeks and a lot of the weeks that we will have. Still incredibly relevant to Tommy's and the work that they do and the work that we're trying to support, but a slightly different angle, as you will see as we get into the conversation. Yeah, thank you very much for your enthusiasm for what we're doing and for getting involved. And I will start in the usual fashion by asking you to let us know what led you to be involved with Marathons for Miracles and Tommy's as a charity.
Well, I think our story is quite different to everybody else's. We are very fortunate in that we haven't experienced baby loss and in fact have had a very straightforward time getting pregnant. And, you know, from that point of view, our story is quite different to everyone else's, I think, so far. But what we had our first baby, Jago, 2 years ago, and he was born at 29 weeks. So that was a slightly different challenge.
Yeah.
I got severe pre-eclampsia very unexpectedly, and was hospitalised at sort of 27 weeks and told in no uncertain terms that I was not leaving until the baby was born, which was a bit of a shock as I was on my way back from a client meeting and I just popped in for a fit to fly letter to go to New York the day after.
You were not, as it turned out.
I was very much not fit to fly, no.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, and one of the things that Tommy's does that I think is much less well known than all the work they do around baby loss is actually do an incredible amount of work funding research into preterm birth in general, but conditions like pre-eclampsia.
Yeah. So you were admitted at 27 weeks. Jago then arrived at
29.
29. So they were clinging on as if
Kept him in for two
right.
weeks.
Yeah.
And then was born at 29 weeks. And then where did you go from there?
We spent 10 and a half weeks with him in NICU, neonatal intensive care, and then moving through the wards down to special care baby unit. And I spent another 10 days as an inpatient while they tried to sort out my preeclampsia at the same time. So poor Robin spent quite a lot of time running between wards.
Got to know the corridors of Oxford. Was it Oxford?
It was Oxford, yeah, the John Radcliffe. We were lucky that we were in such a good hospital, but yeah.
Okay. You're able to tell the story now with smiles on your faces, which is good. And I think that is the interesting part of this, is that there's a happy ending, which is nice. There are many sad endings in a lot of the stories that we have had and will have. And so it is nice to have some good news, but no doubt upon admission at 27 weeks, it was a slightly more stressful time than it perhaps is now.
Yeah. I mean, it was pretty terrifying actually, because I honestly went in for a fit to fly note and I called our local hospital, which is a midwife led unit, and said, look, I need this. Can I come in tomorrow? And she said, oh, what makes you think you need it? And I said, well, I'm flying back just before the cutoff date. I think I'd rather have it. But also I've just got slightly fat ankles. That was the only symptom I had. And I said, I've got slightly fat ankles and I think you'll probably want to do bloods, I would guess, because of that. And this somehow incredibly sort of perceptive midwife said, well, where are you right now? And I said, Suffolk. And she said, can you go to hospital in Suffolk? I said, no, I'm not. No, I'm with a client. No. She said, well, just pop in this evening then, come by at 8 o'clock on your way back. That'll be absolutely fine. And I went in and they put me on a blood pressure monitor immediately. And my blood pressure was 200 over 110, which is pretty much off the scale.
Yeah.
And she said, I'm really sorry, but you can't drive. You can't go anywhere. You can either get in the back of the ambulance that's waiting outside, or you can call your husband. But you and I said, no, I've just driven here from Suffolk. She said, no, you're within a very short amount of time of having a fit or a stroke, and you need to go to Oxford right now, and not under your own steam.
Yeah.
And it was pretty terrifying at the time. I
Yeah.
remember you turning up, and I was sort of just sat on a bed shaking.
I think for me at least, it took a while to appreciate the sort of severity of it, because I don't think either of us really knew what pre-eclampsia was. You might, when we even looked the other day at the week by week stuff you get on the NHS website about what's going to happen this week, and I think it's only. In fact, it's only quite late on that it starts to say about swelling and pre-eclampsia.
Yeah.
But unless you thought to click on that and actually go down the rabbit hole of what it is preemptively, it wasn't something that was on our radar.
Well, and I'd been told I was incredibly low risk. I was very slim, very fit, very active. I was still running a bit. I was riding my horse every day. I had very low blood pressure before I was pregnant. I didn't tick any of the boxes for it. I'd never, no one in my family had ever had it. It was, I didn't tick any boxes. So they just kept saying, don't worry about it. Fat ankles is normal. That happens when you're pregnant. Things, there was a lot of these things happen when you're pregnant. That's okay. And with hindsight, I can see how ill I was. But at the time, I was being told that was normal in pregnancy.
Yeah.
And
so how long, again, in hindsight, do you think you'd been showing symptoms of preeclampsia before you ended up in the back of an ambulance?
I was admitted about 15th of January, 14th, 15th of January. And with hindsight, I wasn't well at Christmas.
Okay. So that's a good sort of three.
That's a good 3 weeks. I was quite short of breath, and I wasn't showing very much. I had a really small bump, and everyone kept saying, oh, well, the baby's just up in your ribs. It turned out afterwards that I'd got like 2 stone worth of fluid in my chest cavity.
Wow.
And it was just water, sort of squashing my lungs. And yeah. So with hindsight, yes, you could see the trajectory. And I had what they couldn't quite identify it as cholestasis, but it's where you itch everywhere, but particularly his palms of your hands, soles of your feet.
Yeah, Amy had a little very, very late on, I think sort of 39 weeks with Poppy. I think she had mild cholestasis, at which point they say, give it a week, you'll give birth and it'll be gone. Yeah. But I guess earlier on, it's slightly more concerning.
I had this by sort of 18 weeks and they kept saying, no, it can't be cholestasis. It's not cholestasis. It's definitely not. And eventually, when I got to hospital and they did my liver enzymes, it wasn't cholestasis, but it was linked to the preeclampsia. It was that it was the same thing, effectively, that my liver was already giving up by the time I got to hospital.
Just
yeah. So it was, with hindsight, loads of things. But at the time, people just say normal in pregnancy, and because it's your first, you don't know any better.
Yeah, of course. And the other thing is that there are so many things that are just normal in pregnancy.
Yeah, exactly.
Having been through the system 3 times now, essentially, it is a bit of a lottery almost as to what gets picked up and what doesn't. We found this time round with our son who's just been born, we're with the Shrewsbury and Telford Trust, who had a very bad rep couple of years ago and have been through special measures. And as a result, Amy has had every test under the sun. I appreciate that not all trusts can operate under those, because there are so many things that can be just pregnancy. So if they were to test everyone for everything, I guess there's a balance to be drawn there.
Yeah, exactly. That was what the consultant said when they discharged me, was that, you know, they're working to such a broad spectrum that it has to be care for the broadest number of people. And in 9 people out of 10, you know, those symptoms would have been nothing to worry about. And unfortunately, I was the 1 in 10 where they were. And, you know, it's just luck, but that's sort of how it is. But one of the things,
go on.
No, I was just saying, one of the things that's interesting is that we're currently expecting our second baby. And the care's very different when you've been through that before. But one of the things that has been really interesting doing this, and, you know, looking more into what Tommy's does, is that Tommy's has funded research into, and basically has pioneered a test that's done at 12 weeks, that's just a blood test, but actually gives an accurate idea of your risk of pre-eclampsia. So I had it this time and it came back as high risk, unsurprisingly, given that I've had it already. But, you know, but if I'd had that test last time, I would have been on a very different care plan, and we probably wouldn't have been in the same situation.
We'd have known about it, at least.
And it would have been managed, I think, in a different way. And
that's what can be done for someone who's at higher risk of pre-eclampsia? Is it just a case of keep an eye on it and act quickly if it flares up, or is there something that you can do preventatively?
You take aspirin, and it is literally half an aspirin a day.
Makes sense.
And it makes a big difference, seemingly. And then beyond that, it is exactly wait and see. But they're really confident in the aspirin making a huge difference. And so they prescribe it quite freely. If you know, someone in your family has ever had preeclampsia, they will tell you to just take aspirin, because it's really low risk and, you know, makes a big difference. But if you're me in my first pregnancy with no obvious risk factors,
of course,
you obviously don't get that. Whereas, that probably would have made quite a big difference.
But the blood tests could have.
It's been launched at Oxford. I think it was launched in the autumn, and it's now starting to roll out across other trusts. But it's a big Tommy's project, and in fact, I donated my placenta last time to two different studies, one of which I went back and checked, and it was the very tail end of this Tommy study.
Oh wow! So a real direct link. And that's obviously a very pre-eclampsia specific part of what Tommy's do. Having a look here, there's the Premature and Preterm Birth Centre, which is not specifically pre-eclampsia related, but is looking at all causes of preterm premature birth, how to reduce it, how to reduce the numbers of premature births that happen, how to improve the outcomes for those that are born prematurely, and how to sort of reduce inequalities in those outcomes across different demographics. So just, a huge body of work that Tommy's are doing in that area. So if these are ringing bells with anyone listening, please go to marathonsmiracles.com and click on donate now, and your money is going to literally, I didn't know this was going to happen, but as you say, for you to have donated your placenta to a study which is directly improving outcomes for people who were in your position 2 years ago is testament to what Tommy's are doing. So
and it's amazing this, you know, that was a study that was still being wrapped up 2 years ago, and now it's happening, and it's made a tangible difference to me this time, you know, that everyone's aware of the risk level and we know where we are in a way that we didn't 2 years ago. So it's fantastic.
And you're now at 28
weeks.
28
I'll be
weeks.
29 weeks when we run.
So you would have now been in hospital. Last time out. And this time feeling
This
fit,
time last
healthy.
time I was, in hospital and not very well.
How are the ankles? I question you're allowed to ask about anything, and I'm not sure. I might be steering a bit too close to the wind there, but
it's a specific context, Olly. It's fine. Yeah.
So there's the period from 27 to 29 weeks where you're sort of in hospital, not quite sure what's happening, what's going to happen. And then Jago's born at 29 weeks, which is, without wanting to put too fine a point on it, that's very premature, isn't it? That's, for those who are uncertain, premature birth is defined as anything before 37 weeks. What does that look like for you guys as parents at the time? Obviously, Annabel, you said you were fairly unwell yourself then still, and essentially a hospital patient then for another couple of weeks. So perhaps Robin, for those first few weeks, what does that look like as a parent?
Well, it was also very, I know the actual sort of date of birth is always subject to some uncertainty, but we had, even when Annabel went into hospital, we had not really, there'd been very little certainty over when he would be born, how long he might stay in for. And with pre-eclampsia, it's a balancing act between, because the only, like the cure for it, as it were, or the way to prevent it from getting worse is to deliver the baby. So it's a balancing act between the mother's health and Annabel's health and the baby's health. And I think initially, once we sort of got the idea of it, we thought that he might not be that premature. He might stay for quite a while. I remember we had, I think it was about 28 weeks, they sent one of the consultants up from NICU who talked us through the reality of having a 28-week baby. And that's when it really hit that it was going to be, it wasn't going to be plain sailing, and you might have to prepare for, not a great outcome, or, potentially lots of complications. So it was from that point, I think it was a bit, it kind of hit home that it could, it was pretty serious.
She came in and she said, you've got a 50-50 chance whether they'll breathe or not. And and we were on a ward where I couldn't be in a private room, and I wasn't really allowed to have the curtain closed. I had to be visible at all times. I was so unwell. And this consultant sat in front of us and said, 50-50 chance whether they'll breathe or not. So don't expect to hear them cry when they come out. And there will be a team of 10 people with a full crash set up in the room with you as you have your C-section. And that was pretty sobering, I think.
Yeah. That's a very stark reality, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, no one expects to end up in NICU, and actually
No.
a large percentage of babies that end up in NICU are full term. But the real reality of, we don't necessarily expect your baby to be able to breathe is pretty stark.
Mm.
But so he was delivered by C-section. So I was able to go in with Annabel.
Mm.
But he did, so he did cry when he was delivered. He did cry. So there was that instant sort of relief, and you could tell in the room that it was, that was a positive step. But it was, I didn't really know what to expect. We were in hospital before our first, NCT class. So we'd done none of, we hadn't got anywhere near that. And it was quite, I think initially I couldn't quite, it just was so far from what I had expected in my mind of having a baby would be like, that it was, it was almost hard to relate to it as your child in a way, because they instantly it's all wrapped up. He was put in a plastic bag and like Annabel did get to see him for like 30 seconds.
They held him up in front of me, and honestly, he looked like a rotisserie chicken. He was wrapped in a plastic bag, then wrapped in a foil blanket, then wrapped in a towel. And he looked like a sort of plucked chicken. I mean, it was kind of extraordinary. It's not what you think of when you think of that lovely moment where they put the baby on your chest.
And then you just, Annabel was still like very ill, and I had to, no one had really even said, like, do I go with the baby? Do I go with Annabel? Yeah. And he gets carted off in an incubator down a corridor, and you have to just leave Annabel there, which was quite, you sort of you don't know if you're doing the right thing, or who needs your sort of support most. And then it was, was it 10 days? I can't remember, but it was a couple of days before Annabel could spend any length of time.
I could get down there, but I couldn't be there for very long because I was being monitored. I had to have my blood pressure done and drugs every hour. So I could be down on the ward and then I had to be back up. And it was 6 floors and quite a long corridor, and I just had a C-section. So it wasn't exactly practical to be running up and down stairs all the time. I do remember there were a couple of really kind midwives who came down from the postnatal unit and brought the drugs to me on the NICU ward. And I do remember that feeling like such a big thing and making such a big difference. Because postnatal wards are so busy. They've got so many patients and it's so hectic all the time. And there were a couple of them who, it didn't matter how busy they were, they would come to me and they would make it work. Yeah, turn up with the drugs and with the blood pressure cuff and do the whole thing on the NICU ward. That was pretty fantastic, really. Made a big difference.
How did you find being on a postnatal ward without a baby?
Oxford were quite good. They had it's small rooms of 4 off a big ward, and they had a room of 4 that was dedicated to people with their babies in NICU.
Yeah.
So that was better.
Good.
But it's not great because you're still hearing all the other babies up and down the corridor. It's still very surreal. It's not a big part of the setup, obviously.
Yeah.
But, things like I didn't eat a hot meal for the whole of the first week after I'd given birth, because I was never there at the right time when the food got delivered, because that was a moment between my drug slots where I could be downstairs.
Yeah.
And you're slightly bottom of the pile if you need anything, because obviously the people with tiny babies that they don't know what to do with are sort of need help first. But I can remember waiting for drugs, and I've missed my slot to go downstairs. I haven't got time. Now I can't see my baby for another 4 hours because I'm now waiting for a doctor to come round or for something else. And yeah, it was tricky.
It's something that perhaps doesn't work, but then could it ever? I wonder.
Well,
I don't know.
No, I think it would be.
Exactly. I don't think there is a good way. I almost think you'd be better on the antenatal ward with the people who haven't had their babies yet, so that you're not listening to other people's babies all day. But then you're in the wrong place, and that's not how hospitals work,
Unless you were able to have a bed on NICU, but then that's, you're then in the way of very delicate lives that needs
exactly.
No
and
distraction.
if you're a patient as well, that doesn't work because you need different doctors. And
we
were very fortunate in that from when I was discharged, or before I was discharged, you had Oxford, because it's got a children's hospital, has a Ronald McDonald House. So we were very lucky to be given a room in Ronald McDonald House, which is kind of a cross between a travel lodge and a university halls, so that you can, you can live there for as long as you need, really. And it's totally free. It's on site. You're there all the time. So if you ever get to McDonald's, it says, would you like to round your change up? Always do it, because that's where it goes.
Oh, there we go. Good to know.
Because we are 45 minutes from Oxford. So and before Jago was born, I had to drive back and forth. They got kicked out of the ward by 10 o'clock or whatever it was, which for the 84 days that we were in hospital would have taken its top. So it was a bit of a lifeline, really, being able to be there.
84 days. That's a long time when you put it like that, isn't it? And so you were in Ronald McDonald's, Robin, from day one, essentially.
No, from when
yeah, you were in there before I was discharged.
Yes, but from when Jago was
born,
that's when they said you can.
Okay.
Which was because also he's still he was, although he's early, he's still like a normal baby, so they don't, they're up at all times, and you want to be there as much as you can, really, and to get as much of a kind of normal experience of being with this new baby as you can. So we spent a lot of time
and
watching through a
I was going to say, what does that look like, Robin, sort of parenting a baby that's in NICU, 11 weeks premature? Like how hands-on are you able to be? How does that work?
So I think it's certainly much better than it used to be. At Oxford, and I think at many other hospitals, they promote what they call kangaroo care, is what they call it. So they very much encourage you to have skin-to-skin contact with the baby, kind of take him out of the incubator as much as you can. And once you get over that hurdle of not, you sort of, you're thinking that that's not good for him. All the nurses were very good at reassuring you that it was fine. And Jago never had to be ventilated, so he only had a few wires and breathing tubes, not the full setup that some baby. But even in that scenario, you can have them out and have a cuddle with them and so on. So it's not, and we were able to help feed him through a tube and do that kind of stuff. So
you're surprisingly hands-on. Quite quickly, they teach you how to change a nappy through the holes of an incubator, and they really encourage you having them out, having them on you, and it's all got to be skin to skin because they can't regulate their temperature in any way at all. So you have them skin to skin with a pile of blankets on top. And that was really interesting because obviously he's hooked up to all these monitors, so you can see his heart rate, his saturation rates, all of these things all the time. And you could see the difference in the statistics and the numbers when he's on you versus in the incubator.
Really?
And his heart rate would slow, the oxygen saturations would go up. It was really fascinating.
Incredible.
Yeah. So we got to a point when he was in high dependency and Robin was back at work some of the time, and I would often have him out for, I got to the point where I could get him out with a nasal breathing tube and a feeding tube in his nose as well, and all his wires on. I could get him out, put him on me, have him on me. I could do a tube feed with him on me, still holding the tube up here and holding him. And I went through a phase where I would have him out for sort of 6-8 hours a day, which, okay, when you have a normal newborn doesn't sound like very much, but when you think of what you expect from a baby in an incubator, there's quite a lot of time to not be in that incubator.
Yeah.
Yeah. You do quite a lot. And then we had this slightly surreal thing where in the evening they'd really encourage you to leave and just get a bit of space, because otherwise you would go mad. I mean, you're in this ward all the time, and, we'd sort of go out for dinner on the high street and think nobody knows we've just had a baby. And you'd be sort of eating.
It feels a bit like cheating, or you shouldn't, because you wouldn't, normally if you're, when your baby's born, you can't just clock off and, go and have dinner or whatever. So
no.
We sort of joked that we were part-time parenting for a while, but sort of very full on and sort of, you can leave,
Yeah. You're recounting everything with, as I mentioned earlier, with a smile, and you joke about part-time parenting and this sort of thing. And I think it's very admirable that you're able to discuss things in this way. Obviously, you had a positive outcome in the end, which I'm sure helps with that. If this isn't too horrid a question to ask, how do you look back on those 84 days now? Was it a dark time? Was it a celebrate? Were you still very excited that you had a son that had arrived? There must have been moments where you felt it was quite touch and go. How do you reflect on it sort of 2 years on?
To be honest, I'm not sure I think my brain has maybe, especially knowing that in the end it was all okay, some of the really bad bits have almost not lodged in my memory. I've got hundreds of photos on my phone of various bits, and you look at them and it sort of triggers a memory, but I'm not sure I necessarily, to me it almost seems like we were there for no time at all, even though at the time it was just went on and on and on. And there were there were some bits where we thought, because initially actually he came out pretty good for his gestation, but we had a lot of setbacks and he was very ill at some points.
We hadn't got a name, and they kept joking and saying, "Oh, you're not got a name yet, you're not got a name yet." And he got to about 6 days and they said, look, he's doing really well. We're going to move him down to high dependency. And he moved down to high dependency. He was there for about 36 hours. And I got a phone call, and it was the day after I'd been released, and I was in Ronald McDonald and Robin. And I got a phone call at 6 o'clock in the morning who said, I'm just calling you because your baby's had to go back to ICU. He's got sepsis and an infection marker of over 300. And I think any kind of infection marker over about 50 is not good. In a tiny baby, 300 is really bad. And we kind of went running in and thought, shit, we better come up with a name. If the worst happens, he's got to have a name.
Yeah.
And we had a few moments like that where there were things, and that they couldn't work out what caused it. And eventually they worked out he had a long line that was basically giving nutrition pretty much right to the heart, and it had dislodged. And the nutrition was just being pumped into his chest and had caused a massive infection. And, it took a while to get to the bottom of. It was it 3 different types of antibiotic on a continuous IV? It was the kind of thing that'd be pretty scary in an adult, and on a baby that weighed 2 pounds was pretty terrifying. So we did have some pretty touch and go moments. We had a few, we had a few kind of, I held him down for a lumbar puncture 3 times. That's not something anyone wants to do for their baby. They don't administer pain relief to give a lumbar puncture to a baby because they don't need to, which is pretty scary and really unpleasant. He had so many cannulas that at one point they were talking about cannulating his scalp because it was the last vein left. But then there was some, we turned up one day and he was having a blood transfusion because his iron was low. And it was halfway through it, and they said, look, you go and get something to eat. Fine. We went to get something to eat. And we came back in, and he was notorious at this point for being a cannula remover, a feeding tube remover. He would take everything out. The dexterity of a preterm baby is extraordinary. They can get hold of a tiny wire and remove it. It's extraordinary. And we walked in to find him holding the cannula, administering his blood transfusion and waving it around the inside of his incubator. And honestly, it looked like something from a horror movie. The poor nurse who was looking after him was mortified. She said she'd literally just checked him. She had literally been walking back to her chair as we'd walked into the room to write up the notes. But and you have to find the humour in the things like that because it was so ridiculous. He was absolutely fine, but it was so ridiculous, and he was so pleased with himself for having got rid of this thing that he didn't want.
A lot of people that we talk to more on the miscarriage and the loss perspective, particularly with sort of recurrent miscarriages, talk about how they just get caught up in the process after a while. Was there an extent to which you, as you say, it's looking back, it's very, very different to what other parents experience from the first 2 months of having a baby, but actually when you're in it, this is the process, this is how it works, this is what we're doing, and you just get on with it.
Totally. And I think that the thing with totally, you just get through it and you just do each day at a time. You can't think too far ahead. And, I think one of the most soul destroying bits was we thought we were going home for Easter, and we'd really got that in our heads. And then they found a hernia, an inguinal hernia, which is where the canal that the testes descend through doesn't close properly. Super common in boy babies in general. It's about 80% of preterm boy babies. It's really common. It's not a big deal. It's a really, easy operation, whatever.
Yeah.
But it was Easter Thursday. The surgeon couldn't come and check it till Monday. Then it was going to be a wait to get on the list. Then it was this, then it was that. And, that was the moment where we'd fixated on Easter, and suddenly Easter wasn't happening. And that's the moment where you start slightly falling apart. And actually, as long as you just keep going day by day, and you're in there with other people.
Yeah, of course.
I think slightly in opposition to the thing, if you're going through recurrent miscarriages, you feel very much you're doing it by yourselves. We were going in every day and sitting next to the same sets of parents who'd been there. You're seeing the same faces every day. Everyone understands everyone you're seeing understands.
When did you feel like you were out of the woods? as such.
out of the. I mean, ultimately, when we walked out the front door, even when you thought as Annabel was saying, even when you thought everything was sorted, it took even to get all the bits of paper signed off. It felt, but it was I think there were points throughout where you thought you might have, it was all looking up, and then it wasn't, and then it was.
I think
it was when we put him in the car seat, I think, and walked out. That was, it almost didn't, you almost until that point, and you driven out of the hospital, there was
Expecting a doctor to come and
something would go,
knock on the car
someone
window.
would come running out and say, oh wait, no, they've got to do that. It was, you get to that when there are so many things that you think are going to happen and don't. You have to really kind of move to something completely different before it felt like.
And for me, I think it was later, because you'd gone back to work, but when we brought him home, he was full term, but he still only weighed 4 pounds. Really tiny, and he was fallen off the bottom of the centile chart and all this kind of stuff. He was I was breastfeeding him, but he was also having to have fortified breast milk, and we were having checkups from the neonatal nursing team. They have an outreach team who come and check up on you at home. And they were sort of checking up on his hernia surgery, which he'd literally had the day before we left. And then also checking up on his weight. And they were coming every other day to weigh him, which, lots of people have had small babies or babies that have lost a lot of weight and know the pressure of that. But if the baby's 4 pounds, they're really antsy about it. And there was various, he wasn't gaining weight fast enough. He wasn't really gaining weight at all. And then we went through various options and iterations. And at various points, they muttered about, maybe he needed to come back in to be fed more and whatever. In the end, they gave us super high calorie preterm formula, which completely did the trick. And we combi fed from that point on, and it worked. But I don't think I felt we were out of the woods until he started gaining weight. And they actually said, no, you're over to the health visitor now. You're not, you're no longer anything to do with the hospital. That for me was the out of the woods, I think.
The other thing we didn't mention is that we live in Northamptonshire, but hence the marathon in Northamptonshire, because of where the nearest hospital that Annabel was supposed to have the baby in originally in is in Oxfordshire. So we ended up in the John Radcliffe, which has a very, very good neonatal unit. But what was sort of unknown to us is how the NHS is structured in trusts, and where it's a bit of a postcode lottery as to where you end up. And I don't know how long we've been there, but sort of a month or so. When he was starting to look a little bit better, they started talking about like transferring him to another hospital.
To Northampton.
And by that point, we'd got, we knew the doctors, we knew the team, we had somewhere to stay. We knew the care was good. And then we had this, what seems like just an admin thing that just shouldn't be a problem, this extra burden or worry of, are you going to get sent to another hospital?
But luckily they weren't full. And that was what it came down to. They weren't full at Oxford.
You're now, as you say, 28 weeks pregnant. So you're sort of in and around that period that you got to last time with Jago. How do you feel that your experience last time has affected your approach to being pregnant again?
I think in a way less than I thought it might. I feel very relieved to have got to this point feeling well. And, we sort of talked a bit about symptoms and hindsight, and I can feel that this is a very different pregnancy so far. Yeah. Fingers crossed. There's absolutely no way I would have contemplated even running 5K at 29 weeks last time. I physically couldn't have done it. Yeah. Whereas, I don't see why I shouldn't be running at the weekend. That's quite different. And I think that's helped. I have literally just come back from the trip to New York that I was, the same trip as I should have done 2 years ago. And the week before was pretty tense, I think it would be fair to say. I had a consultant's appointment, I had a scan, I had a midwife's appointment. They all signed me off to go, but I was still very nervous and quite stressed about going, I think. Having come back from that, I now feel quite relaxed. I think, as far as you can be at this point. I think if the symptoms start to show up next week, let's have a different conversation. But right now, I can feel the difference, and that's quite
Well,
big.
and equally, if I'd have asked you the same question 15, 20 weeks ago, would it have been a different response? So those early
Probably.
stages, is there some?
Yeah.
I think. Well, also, I think it was the point where we had thought more about it was when we were considering, do we want to try for another baby? That's what, because you have to, yes, we want another one, but also, are we prepared to take the risk? And also, I'm not going to get ill from it, but Annabelle could feasibly, she still could, but we were making a decision that wasn't just Jago having a sibling and us having another baby, but it was the fact that Annabelle could be ill again. So that was quite, you're sort of making a decision knowing that something very bad could happen is quite tough. And there's a sort of niggle at the back of your mind, which is like, is it almost selfish to, if that makes sense.
And the statistics on long-term effects of severe preeclampsia, early onset severe preeclampsia like I had, that are not great. My blood pressure has increased by about 25% as a baseline from where it was before I was pregnant the first time. In my case, that's not a huge issue because it was slow before range. But if it did that again, it would be quite problematic. And I probably would be living with high blood pressure from my mid-30s to the rest of my life. That's obviously not great. The statistics on heart attacks and strokes in women who've had severe preeclampsia are pretty scary.
Yeah.
But then the doctors are very good at saying the chances of it reoccurring as severely are very slim because you're being more closely monitored, you're taking aspirin. We would get on top of it at the first sign, not, while you're already halfway
We wouldn't let it get that
off the
far.
cliff. Yeah. So I think it was more at that stage. And I think once it happened, we were pregnant. Well, that was, you're doing it. You might as well.
You're in it now, yeah. One of the aims of Tommy's with their preterm birth work is sort of providing and improving sort of psychological support and understanding to parents of the process. You mentioned the visit from the consultant at about 28 weeks to sort of run you through what it might look like. How valuable an experience do you think that was in the long run? So just not going in to have a bit of pre-warning, and
I think any information that we were given that let us know what to expect in any sort of way was helpful. But to be honest, Olly, I don't think we were pretty in the dark. Even when we were in hospital, I think a lot of, from what I remember, a lot of the leaflets we were given, and I don't know if they were from Tommy's or there are other charities, but I'm not sure that for me was, I did a lot of Googling on my phone, but that's a terrible idea. But we did receive, we got a lot of sort of pastoral support. At Oxford, there was a very good local charity called SNAP who were a great help to us. But I think, that's just that reassurance and having someone to talk you through. Because also something, when a doctor tells you something, it's delivered in a certain way, and actually someone that is, or even just a different telling of the same thing can make you feel better about it. So that was very.
And there was psychological support. There were psychologists on the unit who would go around and talk to people. But somehow, I think there was a sort of sense that we were coping, and so we never got offered psychologist support. We worked. I think we were very good as a team, and we were very good at looking after each other, and we did cope with it pretty well. I think we're both quite practical, and we kind of plugged through day by day. But I think it would have helped me to have talked to someone more as we were leaving, about what had happened and talked through what had happened. And I think that's the sort of thing that probably I should have gone and looked for afterwards with, say, through Tommy's.
Yeah. But there's probably a lot of trauma there without there doesn't need to be a tragic ending for there to be no trauma and stress and
a certain amount of grief, because you don't get the baby experience you think you're gonna get. And we joke about it and say, oh, well, we went home with a, we didn't do the newborn stage, no idea. I mean, we keep talking about this one. We went home with a baby that's fed every 3 hours on the clock, that had a reasonably good sleep routine because he's fed every 3 hours on the clock, and we knew what to expect from him and of him. And, he had that kind of routine already set up, but also you missed all the magical newborn bits as well. So there is a bit of a grief for all the things you missed. That
One last question. You said, Robin, that you felt you were a bit in the dark through the whole time that you were in hospital. What advice would you give to parents going through something similar now that you learned looking back, or you wish you'd known, or any pearls of wisdom? And Annabel, you can have a think as well.
Don't Google. Robin used to Google and I never would, and it was never a good thing.
I mean, I think I was very fortunate that I was given time off work, but I think there is now leave and statutory leave available for preterm births, but at the time it wasn't available. And I think we
were about 2 months too early.
Being as present as you can. I think I felt like I was able to. Eventually I was able to. I felt like I had bonded with him, and I felt like I had played that sort of fatherly role when he was in hospital. But by being there, the other thing I would actually, it goes back to what we said at the start, which was the feeling like you were almost cheating by going away for going for a drink or going just to have some time out. And I think that at the time when you're in the moment, it feels awful to kind of leave this sick baby and go and do. It does feel like you're being selfish to go and do something for yourself. But actually, in hindsight, I think we'd have really struggled if we hadn't done that. And the care he received was I think to sort of leave him in the care of the nurses, even just for a couple of hours, and go and have a coffee or whatever, I think was super. And I think actually, if someone had, even on day 2, if someone had just said to me, "Look, go and have a walk," or go and, I think that would have maybe, maybe do it rather than sitting there for hours and hours and hours, not sleeping and just sort of staring at this thing that isn't sort of helping anyone. So that would maybe be my tip.
Yes, you are helpful being there, but you're not helpful if you're totally overwrought, totally over emotional, and you've been there for 24 hours without sleeping. Give yourself a bit of space.
You wouldn't do that with you wouldn't do that with a, as you say, a normal newborn. Like we've got one now. I don't sit and watch him sleep the whole time. As soon as he goes to sleep, I go to sleep.
Exactly. And you wouldn't not go out for a coffee
and
either.
You need to for your own sanity, don't you? It's it makes perfect sense. But I can see how, as we said earlier, when you're there and you're in that process, it's very easy.
It feels like the wrong thing to do. At the time.
It's definitely the healthiest thing to do in the long term.
I think that the way you're able to talk about it now, what was probably a very difficult time for you both, is incredible and very admirable, and speaks a lot to you as a couple. I'm fortunate enough to know you as a couple, and it doesn't surprise me for a second. But for those listening who don't, your ability to sort of smile about it and discuss it so openly is incredible. So thank you very much. We move on to the small matter of having to go for a run on Saturday. Valentine's Day, no less. I'll be spending it mostly with your husband, Annabel.
Lucky you, Olly, lucky you.
And you'll probably be spending it with my wife.
Yeah, exactly.
Make of that what you will. Where are we going? What are we doing? What's the plan? And firstly, what are your two's running background? I know probably more about Robin's running accolades than yours, Annabel, but it sounds like you're a fairly keen runner as well.
I mean, I used to run a lot. After university, I ran ran a bunch of half marathons, ran a marathon, had a knee injury, and then didn't run very much. And then it ran a bit just for fun and, but not anything very serious. And then one of the things that the charity that looked after us in Oxford, SNAP, their biggest fundraiser of the year is the Oxford Half Marathon. And so when we were I think I was probably sat in the pumping room, plugged into a breast pump, trying to pump milk. And they had posters on the wall saying, you support us with a skydive or come and run the Oxford Half. And I thought we should really do that. You know, he was born in the January, the Oxford Half is October. And I thought we can aim for that. That's something to have in mind to do that's like tangible and practical, and we can, you know. And I persuaded a somewhat reluctant Robin that we would do this. And so we entered, and then we managed to rope in actually most of my school friends brilliantly, all said, let's do it. Let's all run it. So there were 10 of us in the end. The last 2 school friends, one was 9 months pregnant and one was 2 weeks postpartum. So they came and cheered, but the rest ran, which was pretty amazing. And we ran the Oxford Half last year. And then I've done a very, very average amount of running since then, which is not very much, but
you have very good excuse. So, and Robin, you're getting in podcast terms, you're getting in ahead of Tom, who we'll hear from next week, who I know you've done quite a lot of running
Well,
with.
I mean, I would say, Olly, I've come out of retirement for this.
Okay.
For this, you know,
So would I.
The days of fell running and you know, endurance sport are possibly left me with Jago, but yeah, I've dabbled in running over the years. But this would be my first formal marathon distance event. I have actually never entered a on the dot marathon distance.
Well, there we go. You're welcome.
Event. So this is a first for me. You just have to
so
tell me to stop.
Where are we going? As I mentioned, I was in Oxfordshire at the weekend, probably not far away from where we're going to be running on Saturday, and it was wet, to put it mildly.
So, yes, we are likely to encounter some mud.
Yeah,
I advised you, Olly, to wear trail shoes, and I think that stands. But
yeah,
we'll start with a park run in Daventry, and then run out to the Grand Union Canal, which I thought was a safe bet for some reasonable quality terrain. But I was informed actually on Sunday that part of the towpath may have collapsed. So we might need to do some on the cuff redirection.
Okay.
And then we're going to.
We had a sinkhole appear in one of our canals up this way a couple of months ago.
Oh,
so
really?
oh yeah,
hopefully none of that.
Yeah. Well, I did sort of over the Christmas holidays. I tried to go out. I thought it was when we had all the snow, and I thought actually this canal towpath might be a good bet for some running, and I nearly fell in. So, but we won't be
not on this bit.
We won't be doing that bit. And then we're going to weave back down to Byfield, which is where we live. So it should be a nice route, albeit a little bit muddy.
Another one wet underfoot. We had stretches of sort of 2 to 3 miles on Saturday that were real skating. And I woke up a little bit yesterday morning, but mostly this morning, we're recording this on Monday, with muscles hurting and considering I've trained for this for like 7 months, I've done a fair bit of running. This is my 7th marathon and there were muscles hurting that I didn't know existed. And that sort of skating on mud is a whole new game. So hopefully,
hopefully won't be that.
We've tried to minimize that.
Okay, we'll see. Hills.
There's a few hills, but not too. I mean, again, the advantage of the canal.
There's one hefty one on the way back, but it's not.
Northamptonshire is neither a flat county nor a hilly county.
There you go.
It offers everything.
I've said this a few times over the last few weeks. If you run 26 miles in any direction in this country without going up a hill at some point, I think you've done fairly well. So, no, I'm sure it'll be a good day out. We've done some long bike rides in our time, Robin, together, and managed to keep each other company reasonably well. And that was with Tom as well, who can cause anyone to have an argument. So I think we'll be all right. So Annabel, you're going to run the park run with us?
I'm going to do the park run with you.
And Jago?
And Jago, I think.
Excellent.
Yeah. And then bow gracefully out.
Perfect. Sounds good.
And I think we might have some additional company for the park run.
Might have a few others.
I think we'll get some more to join for the park run, but
excellent.
Perhaps not for the whole thing.
I think it'll be a fantastic day out. I'm really looking forward to it and looking forward to seeing you both and to meeting Jago. I've not actually met him. 2 years old. So yeah, no, we're very excited, and thank you again for being involved, talking very openly about your experiences. And again, as we said earlier, it's a topic we're not covering so much elsewhere, but it's very relevant for Tommy's and the work that they're doing. So if anyone listening would like to donate, please do via the website. But thank you again, and I look forward to seeing you at the weekend.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us, Olly.